Greetings, fellow tarot travelers, tripping through the tetrahedral triptych of cards I shall lay before you. I'm Tarot Torch. By now, everyone has heard about the Notre Dame Cathedral and how it caught fire. But there's a lot of questions that are unanswered in the media today. For instance, the Notre Dame Cathedral burned too fast and too completely over too large of an area for a simple electric fire. I mean, if it's an electric fire, that's usually a small localized area, and there are fire alarms. How could the whole cathedral burn that quickly, that completely, and that fast from a small localized problem? Now, the electrical system of Notre Dame Cathedral was known to be up-to-date and high quality. The Notre Dame Cathedral is the biggest tourist draw in France, which is the leading edge of a $42 billion a year annual revenue for France. And the Notre Dame Cathedral is the #1 tourist destination. This national treasure owned by the French government certainly was not ignored, considering its enormous historic and economic value and as a storehouse of precious art. Now, when talking with the lead investigator of the fire, Jean-Luc Marchand, he said, "In our examination of the wreckage, we discovered that some of the circuit breakers and sockets hadn't been updated since the reign of Louis XII. King of France." Well, with a short look into the computer, you'll see that Louis XII was King of France in 1515. That's when Louis XII reigned France. And electricity was put into widespread use in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So that's not just improbable, that's fictitious and impossible. So why would the lead investigator send out such a ridiculous statement? Maybe he was tired of the press. But it really makes you wonder when he continues and says, explaining that many of the fuses from the time of the cathedral's construction were made of solid oak, while much of the wiring consisted of twisted cords of straw. And the light bulbs we found were so incredibly antiquated that their filaments were made of wool strips dipped in kerosene or whale oil. And to make matters worse, Notre Dame's entire electrical system was hooked into the power company's transformer on the pole outside with a single strand of hemp twine. It's a miracle the damage wasn't worse, he said. You know, Marchand went on to add that the fire likely started due to a malfunction from one of the rectory's 14th century wicker space heaters. I mean, I think it's humorous, really, but it's also disinformation, and it's how the whole story of an electric fire spread. You see, there's no proof of an electric fire. Some people heard an explosion before the fire began, and Christopher J. Hale, a Time columnist, tweeted he had a friend who worked at the cathedral who had said the cathedral staff said the fire was intentionally set. Now, this tweet was removed a few moments after it was sent out. Who knows why? But there's a lot of questions in the air as to how or why this fire occurred. Some want to blame Muslim extremists, some Protestant extremists. Some say the president of France started it so that the yellow vests would come together and coalesce in French nationalism and support Macron as president of France. Some say it was for insurance and it was done by the Catholic Church. I mean, there are so many stories and nobody knows the truth. Very much like the World Trade Towers. You know, maybe the building was just so unsafe they had no other way of dealing with the problem. But there are stories of accidental fires and electrical fire, but these stories were all released, just like with the trade towers, before any formal forensic investigation had occurred. So that is disinformation. Now, France has suffered other church attacks recently. There was a fire at Paris's Saint-Sulpice Cathedral on March 17th, and this cathedral is second in size to Notre Dame. And you can check Reuters, they have a beautiful photo of flames leaping out the front door. And there have been church desecrations in recent months in France. Maybe more than 12, but here are 7 of them that I found online. In Nimes at La Basilique Notre Dame des Enfants, it was desecrated with excrement. And then Notre Dame in Dijon was attacked and suffered property damage. In Laval, in southern department of Tarn, the village church was assaulted by young men who twisted one arm of a representation of the crucified Christ to make it appear that he was, well, making an obscene gesture. In the commune of Masson-Lafitte, St. Nicholas Roman Catholic Church saw the tabernacle of the church overthrown and vandalized, and is not the first church in the area to be vandalized in recent weeks. In Uy, in Yvelines, in another incident on February 4th, desecrations had an obvious anti-Christian character, where a statue of the Virgin Mary was found smashed on the ground. Additionally, on Sunday, March 10th, the Church of Saint Vincent de Naintre in the Vienne was reportedly vandalized and desecrated, as well as the evangelical church Hope and Life in Angoulême on the early morning hours of March 9th. Also in Saint-Denis, an over 800-year-old basilica in the northern suburb of Paris was also heavily vandalized in March, resulting in smashed stained glass windows and a severely damaged nearly 200-year-old organ, which has been recognized as a historic monument of significance in France. The tombs of many French kings, including Charles Martel, are housed in the Saint-Denis Basilica. So there you have it. Multiple attacks on churches, and this is simply one more. These may all be unrelated, or from a medieval Catholic view, it's all the work of the devil, and of course they're unrelated. It's the house divided upon itself which falls. But what we're seeing here is a trade tower type cover-up to the truth. I mean, there's been some wonderful, miraculous things. The top of the church steeple we all saw burn and tip over. Well, affixed to the very top of that steeple was a brass rooster that evidently fell down and was unharmed. And as a gentleman was rushing out between the flames, carrying with him the bones and fragments of the saints that were kept in the altars as is required in Catholicism, he picked up the rooster, the metal rooster, and brought it out with him. And inside it was a piece of the original crown of thorns of Jesus that he wore during his crucifixion. And we all saw the ray of light hitting the altar and the cross that was untouched, as though Joan of Arc herself, a saint in France who was killed by the Catholics, had protected it herself. A very tear-jerking experience for most. And you know, I can understand if it was an attack by a subversive group, why they would do it. I mean, the French Catholic Church, you know, where are the Cathars? They were genocided. Where are the Knights Templar? They were genocided. I mean, the Catholic Church in general has led to the absolute genocide of the native peoples of North America, Central America, Mexico, and South America. And only just recently, received an apology? And the people of Southeast Asia and Asia were also genocided by the Catholic Church or by followers of Catholicism. And the abortion issue has led to many women dying, having illegal abortions. in back alley abortions and hangar abortions. And there have been many, many, many other issues. The Crusades, the Children's Crusades, the genocide of the Protestants, the witch trials. And in France in particular, the Inquisition was extremely cruel. And so even when Napoleon at the time arrested 2 different popes and kept them arrested with good cause because of the Inquisition, when released, they just restarted the Inquisition and kept the books illegal that they demanded to be illegal. So there is a growth process, I think, going on here. France and the world needs to address veganism, ecology, climate change, other crucial issues of our time. And traditional old pathways seem to keep people meat-eating, consuming, and not addressing these issues, such as overpopulation. And it's just not working. There has to be a new way of addressing life's problems. We can't simply overpopulate, overconsume, and then have a global catastrophe and an Armageddon war when all we need to do is go vegan and be responsible. So I can see where both sides are coming from. And as they rebuild Notre Dame Cathedral, I certainly hope they rebuild their Catholic faith and start to address these concurrent problems and the problems of the Catholic Church, especially in light of the current pedophile scandal ruining the Catholic Church's reputation. So anyways, today to review this topic and address this topic, I've chosen the Jacques Viville Tarot de Paris. It's one of the oldest tarot decks known from French tarot, from Marseille tarot that we have. And he was a cartier, that's to say a card maker, from 1643 to 1664. It's thought this deck is from 1650. This is a wonderful deck, and I recommend it to all Marseille Tarot students. And I am just one of the many. So here's the deck, and we'll shuffle it up a bit and ask the cards to give us a unique insight into what happened. Why now with this burning of the cathedral of Notre Dame de Paris? Is there a reason for it? Is this like Nostradamian? Is this some kind of omen? I mentioned this to a woman the other day at a store, and she said, "Oh gosh, I hope it's not an omen." And I thought, what an intelligent response. But the point is, it could be an omen. This could be a very serious problem that is just now erupting. And it may be the harbinger of bigger problems yet to come, to France, to Catholicism, to Christianity. I know this is supposed to be the last pope. And I know the current pope is a Jesuit. And, this is part of some other prophecies that are being fulfilled. So let's see what the cards have to say about the Notre Dame Cathedral fire. And our first card is the Five of Wands. Now, the Five of Wands is about overcoming in the past. The middle card is going to be the Fool. The Fool is a very interesting card. It does mean that someone is coming, that a man usually is entering into the field. And yet here is, in this particular deck, the Fool going towards the past and going towards the overcoming of something. So foolishness overcomes something. And towards the future is Le Chariot, the chariot. And here we see two higher arcana cards, making this a propitious reading. And the reading does go from lower arcana to higher, and again to higher. So this is a positivistic reading. And what the cards seem to be saying, well, the chariot represents, I didn't mention its interpretation, it represents the splendor of your presence in the ultimate sense. And it usually represents regalness and viability. So here we have foolishness being overcome in order to preserve viability. Well, in many ways, we could say that there is a mismanagement issue with the burning of Notre Dame Cathedral. Of course, most people know that already. But it could be like the World Trade Towers. The insurance was up, the buildings needed to come down. There was no easy or simple way to do it because of regulations. And so they killed a lot of people and brought the buildings down. Or maybe planes hit it from a foreign country. It depends which view and which school of thought you wish to attend. And here, likewise, they may have needed to overcome the obstacles of a falling apart building and couldn't really pull the whole building down and rebuild it without a huge social outcry. And with the yellow vests protesting, they were worried it might unravel French society, whereas a fire would definitely bring the French people together. Now, if this was a terrorist attack, we might think that the terrorist simply blended in with the crowd and supports the idea of overcoming this terrorist problem. But in terms of an electrical fire, I see absolutely nothing here that speaks of an electrical fire. Now, let's see, first of all, what is being overcome? And we have the Six of Cups. And the Six of Cups traditionally represents a marriage. And it's a very important card that is really the hallmark of the cups. It represents the sole source of the culture and the people, which is really what Notre Dame is. And we have the Three of Coins. Now, the Three of Coins, and interestingly, in this deck, the coins do seem to be in this direction from what I've gathered in my research. I know in some decks it's the opposite direction. The Convair deck made it in the opposite direction. In this particular deck, it seems to be this way. You have to look at the Bibliothèque Nationale in France to understand why. But the Three of Coins represents some kind of product. So we have here, in the retro aspects of thinking, in the past sort of thought formations that are not really fomented. The idea that France will overcome, it will rebuild, its culture is going to be kept intact. Okay, yes, we know that. Now let's see what the present is about with this Fool card. And we have the Ten of Swords, which is exhaustion. In this case, it might be the people are fed up and tired of it all. And that might be speaking of the Yellow Vest protests. And we have the Queen of Rods, or the Queen, it's called La Reine de Bâton. And she is very interesting to see her in this configuration. Because, you know, you have the Fool, which is someone who doesn't know anything, and then you have the Queen of Rods, who really knows quite a bit. I mean, the Queen of Swords says quite a bit. The Queen of Cups keeps a lot of secrets. The Queen of Coins knows where the money is. But the Queen of Rods, she knows what's going on, especially with espionage and things like that. And here she is on the Fool. And here is exhaustion. Well, that's very interesting. So before I give an interpretation of that, I'd like to see what the future is, because she, first of all, is looking to the past. She's actually looking at the production of work. And I mean, it's possible that the French people want work. And this was, you know, a fire started by Freemasons or others who want labor, who just want the job of rebuilding it. It's falling apart. They want the contract. It's a big money contract. It's going to hire thousands of people, and they want the money to go through. And the way that she's looking at the Three of Coins, it would seem like it's that way, and that would be the primary culprit I'm seeing in the cards. And to clarify the chariot, we have the King of Wands. And here's the King of Wands. I adore this deck and how it characterizes the people. These French characters. There was a famous comic political satirist in the 50s in Paris and in the 60s. But nothing like Viville. Viville really captures the essence of these people's personalities. Anyways, the king is also looking towards the past. His days is towards the culture. So we might say that Macron is concerned about French culture, or even the Bourbon family is worried about the culture. And they're so exasperated and exhausted from the erosion of culture. European civilization is being eroded not just by the attacks on the churches, and not just by Islamification, and not just by EU trade, which blends and blurs all the boundaries, so all the Frenchness is being eroded away, but just by modernization. You know, we're not in the dark ages anymore. Everybody has a computer, and they just don't buy a lot of the old-time phenomenon. They like the new stuff. And then we have the Six of Wands. And the Six of Wands can be collusion, but it can also be cooperation. And it's about being able to not necessarily conspire, although that could be part of it, but it's about bringing people together, bringing the right people together and breaking up the wrong people from being together as a necessary military or strategic move. And so when we see these cards as such, what I'm seeing is that there was some kind of a labor issue with the burning of this church. And, you know, you could say that the Ten of Swords is crossed wires and the laborer lit it on fire. I mean, this is just what they want us to believe that's in the press. You know, maybe that's true because this would be the crossed wires and this would be the labor concern. So let's not discount what they're saying as a possibility. But with all the church desecrations and the fire at Saint-Sulpice is just so improbable at this time. So let's look to a deeper possibility. And that is that the king, Macron, is just sick and tired of maybe the French society keeping him down from his progressive agenda with the EU. And that people know from the espionage business what happened. It had to do with re-inspiring and reinvigorating the economy with some new work. And that there's a possibility, because espionage is implied but not stated. You know, the Queen of Swords would have more to do with espionage, but the Queen of Rods would have more to do with, moles, long-term surveillance. It wouldn't have to do with short-term activity, but it would be knowledge of, passive knowledge of. And so, gee, this could have been an inside job. And I wouldn't say that normally, but, you know, we've got the king and the queen here. I mean, that's very much systemic. That's very much part of the system. So I would say that's a possibility. It's also a possibility it was the electrician at hand with the crossed wires. But you know, the Queen and the King of Rods could also represent combatants against Catholic culture, Protestant or Muslim, because these are passive combatants. And those two communities are, the Jewish community is another community that could have been involved with it, because these are passive combatants. And so perhaps the destruction of French culture, which is really one of the motivating things here in the vestige first grouping of cards, where we have the Six of Cups, you know, the destruction of French culture may have been also a motivating force. So if I'm going to have to narrow this down, let's have a look at the primary cards now. We have the Chariot and the Fool, and we have the Five of Wands. And the Five of Wands is overcoming. So it's about overcoming product and labor and overcoming culture. the continuance of culture, like through marriage, through creating the next generation to carry the cultural torch. So this may mean that there was a need to develop the French culture, and that this was an act that was very foolish. Whomever did it, it was a very foolish move, and that they were just sick and tired and thought themselves imperious enough to make such a move in combating French culture. And as a feminine icon, this can also, I mean, I don't want to degrade women. It's not the devil card, but it could bring in, you know, heavy metal, dark kind of imaging. But besides Islamic and other, or espionage of foreign countries and concerns. But it was ultimately a foolish move. And that the outcome of it is going to be some severity. There's going to be cameras everywhere, and people are going to be looking into people's phones and emails, and they're going to be looking very closely to see who was involved in this process. And we're going to see a bit of a police state arriving in France. And we may see France go so much to the police state right wing, but, you know, in Nostradamus' prophecies, something happens where the people, like the Yellow Vests, break into the presidential offices and find some kind of letter or email in the president's files. And this leads to the election of a king. And this is one of the interpretations I have read about in Nostradamus literature. And it's possible that this will lead towards the election of a Bourbon family. That the people will be so tired of having their churches attacked, they go extreme right-wing and back to monarchy. That police surveillance modern EU state is not enough. They want a king to come in and literally kick out what they consider to be the trash. And that means anything that's not French Catholic. And there could be that kind of an activity. I mean, there's no end to what the chariot can produce in ethnic cleansing, in warfare, in any kind of a contest. The person sitting in the carriage of the chariot is a peer. It's someone from the court. It may even be the king himself or the emperor himself. And so this is not a card to be played with or to take lightly. And so from overcoming problems to foolish action of burning the church, out comes not just a police state, but a possible monarchical purge of France. That's how serious this situation may be. I mean, instead of learning from their past, you know, right outside of the front doors of Notre Dame Cathedral, people were burned at the stake. And the French Catholics don't study karma, but perhaps they should. Because look what has happened with the flames from those two bodies 500 years ago. It now has lashed their cathedral. But instead of responding with asking why did this happen to us and making a cultural evolution forward, we may see a regressive step backwards to monarchy and to ethnic cleansing even. So the French Revolution may not be over. And that's what the cards seem to be saying at this time.